Welcome back to the Nassau Hockey Podcast. James Nichols, John Zelli here with you right before Thanksgiving, and today we're joined by Brett Kahn of Isles Meetups Philly. Brett, thanks for joining us. Before we dive into why you're really here, I have to ask you about your dad, Rich Kahn, who was the PA announcer for the Islanders. Tell us, was that the in-arena announcements? Tell us about growing up with a dad, and obviously you're a super fan, all that. Tell us about your dad, your fandom growing up, and then we'll get into the game next Tuesday.
Yeah, so he was the in-arena voice from 83 through the 95 season. So he joined the team in like a part-time role, and then I think they were looking for a PA announcer, and he had done some smaller stuff. It was starting to build a name for himself on Long Island, doing a bunch of different sports in PA, and he got the gig. And it wasn't his full-time gig, because obviously there's only 40 games a year. Obviously plus playoffs, plus preseason, but still not a full gig. So he was also the head of sports marketing for Sports Channel. So he really was embedded with the Islanders and New York sports in general. And I just remember those were my earliest memories. I was in the Sports Channel box when I would go to games, because that's where we would sit, and my mom would take us. I have a younger brother who's 3 years younger than me. So we would, and at the time at the Coliseum, they were all the way up. So you have to go all the way to the top of the stadium, and that's where technically the luxury suite level was. So yeah, I just remember it being kind of status quo. I didn't think it was special. You're a kid, you don't know. You're it's the same thing as sitting in the stands and just going to a game as a fan. It was my dad. So it was really cool. And but some people in the neighborhood, people knew about it, and everybody was an Islander fan, so it was pretty cool. And ironically enough, that's how I met him. Mikey was living across the street from me, so that's how we met, and that's how he became an Islander fan too.
Was he brought on board? Well, hold on. Sorry, John. Was he brought on board the 82-83 season or 83-84 season?
It was the final Cup year.
Oh, perfect.
But one of the biggest gripes that he still has to this day is that he didn't get a ring.
Oh.
They were not giving them to the entire organizations at that point. It was still it was a lot more hush hush. So that's the one that got away. He's searched for a replica, to see if he would be open to purchasing a nice replica, because there are crappy ones out there.
Sure.
I have 4 of the $30 ones. I just wanted to collect them, but that's something he's always talked about and always wanted. But yeah, he was the voice for the final Cup year.
Where's the retro ring? Somebody's got a retro check. Somebody's got to get him that retro ring made.
Yeah, there are companies that make nice versions of ring, even ones dating back to even further than that. But I think somehow the replicas change the design of the original, and he knew exactly what it looked like. He knew exactly what color it should be, how many diamonds were there, what the design was. And for some reason, some of the replicas of that year were different. And he would just he would dismiss it. He'd be like, no, that's not the right one. I don't want it. But he's had a couple rings since on the collegiate level doing some announcing there, but that's certainly the one that got away.
And just for those who may not know, Mikey, who Brett referred to before, runs Isles Meetups, and he started that down in Charlotte. So I just wanted to make a quick mention of that and give him a quick shout out, just so that people know who we're referring to if you're not familiar with that. And definitely go check out Isles Meetups, and there's chances are there's one in your city or really close. When I'm traveling, I always check them out, so it's super cool. Do you have any kind of your favorite memories or any memories that come to mind of going to games or opportunities to meet players? I think that's all of our or a dream that we get to like spend 5 seconds with an NHL, or especially have a team that we're really into. So any kind of stories would, we're down for that.
The only like player interaction, there's two. One is I was really young, but I have the piece of memorabilia to back it up. I was either in the locker room or like my dad was, and Brian Trottier had broken a stick during the game that I ended up with, that I still have. And at the time they were printing names on the stick, so it still says B Trottier on the stick that I have, and the blade is just taped. Because I think as a kid I probably tried to play with it, but then once I grew up I realized that was stupid and I should just hang on to it because it's probably one of the coolest things I own. So that was one, and I have like I can't tell if I'm manifesting the idea that he actually handed it to me in the locker room or like my dad got it and then gave it to me later. So it's probably the latter, but either way I ended up with it, and either way it's like one of the coolest things I own. And then the other one, my dad. I don't know how. Well, I'm 36, so I was born in '86. And in the early '90s, they had the Hoop It Up tournaments on Long Island, where it was like a street basketball tournament. So it was, I don't know if it was 3-on-3 or 5-on-5, but my dad would be the PA announcer. And one year, Pierre Turgeon was like one of the guests of honor, and my dad took us, but was also having to announce. So like Pierre like sat with us and like babysat us while my dad was like doing the announcing. So there's a couple pictures of like, for some reason, my brother and I were huge Bulls fans then, of course, Michael Jordan. So we're wearing Bulls jerseys, sitting like sandwiched with Pierre Turgeon, who is my all-time favorite Islander, ironically enough. But yeah, those are the two that stick out from when I was a kid and kind of embedded in that culture.
We'll go with the fact that Brian Trottier handed you.
That's fine. I
think we're okay with that.
That's fine. Yeah.
My mom has a Brian Trottier story that she used to say that when she was like a manager at Burger King, I don't know, I guess in the early 80s or something like that, or whenever Trottier was around, like he was a young guy, maybe in the late 70s. And he like came into a Burger King, and for some reason she like knew that he played for the Islanders. I also thought that was really cool. I don't like. She stopped telling that story, so maybe she either forgot about it or maybe it was made up and it was just to sound cool, which it is kind of a cool story, just like a very regular thing.
I think our parents too, like it was much more normal and to run into some of these guys because it was such a community-based team. Like there aren't suburban professional sports teams. Like this is a weird thing, and I think, and players, the dynasty players talk about this a lot, how they were really in the community a lot, and I think they would have interactions with fans all the time. I think it's much more rare and like on a pedestal when you live in like a major city and there's millions of people, and the idea to run into some of these people is probably a lot more rare.
One of the cooler stories that I wrote for the Hockey Writers was about the dynasty baseball team. Justin Bourne, son of Bob Bourne, posted a picture of one of his dad's like summer softball jerseys, which was super cool. It's one of those it looked like one of those Mitch and Ness ones. I wish they sold those.
Ooh.
I know. I've seen different kind of Mitch and Ness baseball tee looking things on eBay before, and I've always regretted not buying them. And there was one just up there. I think it was a Fisherman one. I'm kicking myself. So whoever bought that,
yeah,
good on you. It was like $65, and I'm like in between. Like I really wanted to do it. I should have. And only because I knew that Mitch and Ness was like of the period, and because you could buy like on Etsy and all this stuff. People remake things, which is super annoying.
Yeah.
But that dynasty baseball team was super cool. But I mean, they played against like the Philadelphia Flyers in the summers and things. But I think they just played in leagues as well. Like they would just do charity games and different things. So yeah, it's that how they were embedded in the community is very different. I think that still remains today. I'm sure it's a little bit different. I don't think. I mean, now there's no Coliseum, so you can't have. There's no players walking from the Marriott through the parking lot or different things. And even as time went on, there was a parking lot underneath, and they weren't walking through that that anyway, even the away teams. But yeah, for a long time it made it very unique to be an Islanders fan and to grow up on Long Island. Even though there's a ton of Ranger fans and Devils fans and whatever, and not even a lot of hockey fans to begin with. Yeah, it was super cool to do that. And it's cool that like a guy like Pierre Turgeon, who wasn't on the island that long, right? It was like 2.5 seasons, something like that. It
something like
wasn't
that.
for
It was
very long.
very short. Yeah.
That he felt comfortable enough to do that, and then because he was traded for, and he came to Long Island, LaFontaine went out. If I remember correctly, LaFontaine eventually came back, and he was coaching the Long Island Royals, if I'm not mistaken, the 14 or 16U team, and they were very successful. So it's cool that some of these players come back. I think he was trying to sell his house a few years ago on the North Shore in Nassau County, which is pretty dope. Before we get into the Phillies,
I was going to say Turgeon comes back for the alumni nights now too. Like I've seen him come back a few times, like per Ledecky and Malkin's invitation, and I think if he were to pick any of his teams to call like the team that he played for, I think the Islanders would be that team because I think they were probably the most successful when he was there, and his production I think was the highest when he was here too. But you know, to even give him that, to have him give that sort of stamp of approval on the island and come back is, for only playing 3 years says something about.
Yeah, it was his best season. It was definitely his best season, 132 points in 83 games. And
it's crazy.
What's interesting is that a lot of players had really good seasons that season. That was like one of the highest scoring seasons in NHL history. So he was definitely on the trend. It really showed what he could do, but he played a really long time. I'm looking at his stats now. It's a 19-year career.
Wow.
1,327 points and almost 1,300, over a point per game. He did bounce around later in his career. I always think of him as kind of with Buffalo, the Islanders, and Montreal a little bit. After that, the mid 90s, I don't. St. Louis, he's with Dallas and Colorado. Like I don't remember that.
No, I don't
as much. It's like it's kind of like thinking about Paul Kariya. It's like, oh yeah, he was in like St. Louis and Colorado for a second, and Solani was on Colorado with Kariya at one point. Like thinking about some of those players from the 90s and how like late in their careers they bounce around. Definitely a little weird. Before we move on, James, do you have any other questions for Brett about being nostalgic and being an Islander fan, his dad or whatever?
No, I was just going to mention, Pierre Turgeon. I wrote something back in the day about how he's a Hall of Fame snub, and it's interesting because like I was, the hockey Hall of Fame weekend just passed, and all the national media, podcasts or whatever were talking about it, and the day after is always National Snub Day. Who got snubbed, and I was surprised nobody this year talked about Pierre Turgeon because that's one of the names that usually does come up, but Alexander Mogilny is another one that people really focused on, who's been snubbed yet again. So, but I personally believe Pierre Turgeon does belong in the Hall of Fame. It's one of those things where nowadays the whole class in the Hall of Fame that this past weekend that just went in, none of them have a Stanley Cup, and I think that's what had held back Pierre Turgeon from not getting in the Hall. But at this point, now it's not really a qualification because of how hard it is to do with 32 teams in the league now. I mean, you could also make the argument there weren't 32 teams when Turgeon played, but still not many people have done what he did in, eclipsing 1,000 points plus. So Hall of Fame snub in my opinion. And, loved, I didn't watch him play, but I definitely loved, doing my research on him as a player and, learning about him. And I think he deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame.
Agreed.
Let's move on to the event on November 29th, which is a week from today, when Tuesday night as we're recording this. Brett, tell us about the meetup in Philly next week and what people can. I'm interested too. Like I've been to games in Philly. I liked going to the arena. I didn't get beat up at the game. I wore Islanders gear. I had other friends that were that also happened to be there, which was interesting. So I had a good time. I had a Philly cheesesteak, as one does. So tell us about the meetup, and I'd love to learn more about the group too, and so that we can promote it a little bit.
Yeah, exciting. We haven't gotten a weekend game in Philly in a few years, which is a little depressing. But we make do. I mean, people still come out. We can't obviously like tailgate all day if it was a Saturday or Sunday, but and also the great thing about Philly is that there's a hub next to all the arenas where you can kind of pregame. It's called Xfinity Live, and it's basically a hall full of like indoor bars. So you can congregate at any one of these bars, and there's also like a main hall in the middle. I know a lot of these sports complexes have them now. So we'll be there probably starting at 5 because I think it's 7 o'clock start. Um, really exciting to have our first game meetup of the year. I think so far, as of a few days ago, we had 53 tickets sold, which is good. I would like to get that number up to like 70, 75 if possible. We'll see if we have a nice little last minute push, which is typical. And also the pricing that we got was really special because the Flyers basically said that this is a weird kind of, it's a weeknight game after Thanksgiving. It's expected to be slow, so they lowered the prices significantly. So it's a lower level ticket for $60, which is really great. In the corner where the Islanders shoot twice. We could have done upper level, but I thought 60 was a very reasonable price. And so far, it looks like I was right and people were paying. So really excited for that. And we expect to be loud and proud and enjoy the game. And we had a pretty good track record in Philly, especially when, coming back from 3 goals down on multiple occasions to beat the Flyers. And similar experience, John. It hasn't really, since going in a group is much different than going by yourself, right? So, people aren't going to mess with 50, 60, 70 people. They'll just deal with it. So, really exciting. And we will do like a big group picture in Xfinity Live before we go into the arena. And hopefully it'll be a great game.
Where's the most important question? Where's the best Philly cheesesteak around the arena? Someone's going to want to go eat before or afterwards.
Yeah. So if they're not local, their immediate inclination is to go to Patrigino's, which is the tourist destination. But the best cheesesteak, and unfortunately probably won't be open after the game, but before it would, is John's Roast Pork, which is close to me, I would say about a 10-minute drive from the arena. By far the best I've had, and I've tried a bunch of them. They won a James Beard Award a bunch of years back, which if people don't know is like the top honor in food. So pretty insane for a cheesesteak shack in the middle of South Philly, but they're usually the best. Patsagino's is 24/7. I like this place, Phillips. I used to live right by it. It's on Passyunk Avenue. Again, not too far from the arena. That's also a 24/7 spot. So that's a great spot to go as well. I would still choose Phillips over Patsagino's. But again, if you're not from here and you want to go take a picture in front of the signs and get a cheesesteak at each and taste test them, I get it. I probably would do the same if I went to another city and just wanted the nostalgia of being there.
I forget where I went, but it was very good. It may have been one of the touristy spots, but it was the most authentic one I could get, given my schedule for the day. So I felt pretty good about it. I should have asked this earlier when I mentioned Mikey, but did you two grow up together?
Yeah, we did. Mikey and I lived across the street from each other from when we were. I think I was 5 and Mikey was 4, or it might have been even younger than that. So we've known each other pretty much our whole lives. And I was the first one to move out. So in 95, our family moved to Philly.
Okay.
So Mikey stayed in New York. And we did lose touch for a little bit, like in our later teens and into college. And then we reconnected 2008, 2009 area. And then Mikey I would come back for home openers and games, and Mikey would throw, like after college, he would throw these like massive home opener tailgates where he'd get like 100 tickets and sell all of them. And we would do like an all day tailgate in the lot. first Saturday in October it usually was, and I would come down for the night, stay at like his mom's, and it would be amazing. We'd have a great time.
Go ahead. No, you can finish your story.
No, that was basically it. And then eventually him and his wife were looking to relocate, and kind of they just kind of chose Charlotte on a whim, and they just wanted to move south. So we stayed in touch, and then this meetup stuff snowballed from there.
The question on Twitter while we were promoting earlier today was who was better at street hockey. So you have a microphone and are on the show, so you can really have a final say here if you want.
I just remember us playing a lot, and Long Island was such a hotbed of hockey, like because that's really the only the Islanders of the team, right? So everybody was playing hockey, and I grew up in like the Mighty Ducks era, so like. When those movies came out, I mean, everybody was playing hockey. I was doing like the triple deke on my driveway, and it was the best. So I have no idea who was the best. We both started skating at a very young age. I remember, I think I learned to ice skate at 5 or 6. I think Mikey was right there too, over at the Dix Hills rink. And we would just be out for hours. And if it wasn't hockey, it was manhunt or tag or something else.
That's very Long Island. Manhunt and all that stuff
it was so
very
Long Island. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a kid from the 90s still hiding in someone's bushes in the yard. He's just really owning it on like on a pro level. I wish we should do like we had to do an Isles meetup tournament somewhere. That would be ideal if there was still tailgates. We got to get like the Philly versus Charlotte group, big draft, and we got to have a winner take all best street hockey player between the two of you.
Oh, Mikey would be ultra competitive. I don't know if I want any part of that. We'll see.
Is he a goalie? He strikes me as a goalie.
I don't maybe eventually. I don't remember. I don't know. Like when he went to Cortland and kind of lived up there for a while, I think they were doing some like more serious hockey. But it's possible. I don't know for sure.
I forget that he went up here, and I say up here because I'm in Syracuse. So it's interesting that we could have crossed paths at a certain point along the way, and maybe never knew it. And I've only met him through this before. James, anything else here?
Will you be bringing the Kiefer Bellows tribute video to the game and asking him to play it at the arena?
Can they play a 3.5 second video? Because I think that's how long it would be. Oh man, poor Kiefer.
Kiefer.
But
it's a bummer.
Like it just goes to show you that the Isles Twitter is such just an absolute shouting into the void of like people thinking they know how valued our talent is and screaming for this guy to get in the lineup, and he does. And unlike someone like a Michael Dalcola, they sort of let kind of fester in the bottom 6 for years. New regime kind of evaluated him very quickly, let him go, and they were right to. I mean, he can't even crack the Flyers lineup on a daily basis. Like, they were right. And so I think there are issues with sometimes our talent management and our forward core for sure, but I think most of the time when it comes to scouting, I think we should try to let the professionals do their job. I know it's harder said than done, but that's another rant for another day.
Come on, Brett. We don't do rational takes on Islanders Twitter. You know that.
I think on Twitter I'd probably be as irrational as everybody else, and I'm sure I have been at multiple moments. But let's just say they were right on this one.
All right, Brett, thanks for joining us. You can learn more about the upcoming game by following Brett at IslesMeetup_PHL. Brett, thanks again. You want to hold up your little Pierre Turgeon thing just for because you showed it to us before you go. Just to show that the little signed paperweight. That's dope. I love the early '90s stuff. That's terribly nostalgic.
Yep, it's gonna be on my desk for a long time. So thank you guys very much. And anybody that needs tickets, the link is in our my Twitter bio and pinned to the Twitter page that John just mentioned. And it's also on our Isles Meetups Instagram page as well.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and come back with some Isles hockey talk with James and myself. All right, you're all set to hop off if you'd like. We'll edit around.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it very much. And thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming, brother.
Good luck, buddy.
All right, guys. Bye.
Hockey fans, light the lamp this winter with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. New customers can bet just $5 pregame moneyline on any NHL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. If that wasn't enough excitement for you, you can turn smaller bets into bigger ones with same game parlays. Combine multiple bets like which team will win, how many goals will be scored, and more for your shot at an even bigger payout. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, use promo code THPN, bet $5 on any NHL team to win their game, and get $150 in free bets if they do. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code THPN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
So, James, since our last episode, the Islanders went 2-2-0. So much of what we've seen so far by the Islanders in November, where they've gone 6-4-0 as of tonight on Tuesday evening as we're recording this, has been due to poor starts. You'd expect their record to be even a little bit better than that, considering how they've been able to kind of come back in games. But there are some games like against Nashville where they weren't unable to come back. What I thought was really interesting, and I was reading an article by Kevin Kurz of The Athletic, with always excellent. He asked Lane Lambert about this, and Lambert said it wasn't a trend, though he did recognize it was happening, which is interesting. So I want to quickly get your take on that.
It wasn't a trend that they were continuing to come from behind.
Well, the poor starts that weren't a trend.
Yeah, but I don't know. That's probably it. Sounds like a case of just coach defending his player, defending his team. Because again, you look at, like you said, the Nashville game specifically, and they were down 3-1 after the first period. So, and it's not the first time we've seen that. Just last week, even, right? They went down to Dallas, who look, Dallas is revitalized Jamie Benn, revitalized Tyler Seguin, and then they have Jason Robertson to boot, and Jake Ottinger's playing really well, Miro Heiskanen. So they're a good team. Sure. But Matthew Barzal gives the Islanders a 2-1 lead, scoring a second goal of the year. And what happens 40 seconds later? Not even a full minute, right? They give up the lead again. So I don't know. To say it's not a trend, I don't necessarily agree with that, just because it feels like, and I don't know, maybe it's just because we continually recycle cliches in this business, but it just feels like we're constantly talking about this as a problem with the Islanders in playing from behind and having slow starts.
I think it's particularly bad this year. And what I want to get your take on is, what do you think is contributing to this? And then how do they, if you can kind of remember both questions, how do they fix it? Like, how do they get over this hump?
Yeah, I almost wonder if it's too much like reliability on the goaltending. Like, oh, we can sacrifice a little bit more because, right, they're playing this new system where they are sacrificing some defense for offense. Maybe they're sacrificing a little bit too much, though, and it's causing them to play without the puck more often than not. And they kind of adjust that throughout the game, where they start, locking or hunkering down on defense and get that puck back and get back to their a little bit, more defensive than offensive structure a little bit, and start playing, that style of game. What can fix it really is just starting that way, right? Don't sacrifice as much. Like, I get it. Like, you have one of the best, if not the best goaltender in net for you in the NHL, and you're confident that you're going to get the saves that maybe you're not even supposed to get. However, like, he's still human, and mistakes are going to happen. And you can't always rely on that. So, and the other thing too is, the other night, I think it was it the last game against Toronto or was it the game against Dallas where the defensive pairings were largely in a blender, like Noah Dobson on the third pair with Sebastian Aho, if I'm not mistaken.
That was against Toronto. Things kind of switched a little bit. You saw Romanov with Mayfield. You saw
Yeah,
Pellick with Noah Dobson at certain points as well, which I thought was interesting.
sure.
And made some sense. But I think we could definitely talk about that. I guess I just have more follow-up questions because you kind of sparked something for me. Is, you said, oh, it's the system, it's opening things up and blah blah blah. We're 20 games into the season. I think exactly 20 games into the season, if I'm not mistaken, as of after Toronto. Is it a system system thing at this point, or are they just making mistakes? Because I'm seeing at this point, it's poor decision making. That's the primary driver, as far as I see it. Now, could some of it be because of the systems? Maybe. But we're 20 games in the season plus preseason, all these practices, tape, this and that. Is it a lack of focus? Again, it's like out of the gate, there seems to be a lack of focus. They're making very bad decisions on the ice. Like they're still managing to win more than they're losing, but they don't look good doing it. Like that game against the Leafs was horseshit. That, other than the fact that they won, that was a terrible game. There's little to no redeeming quality other than Sorokin in that game. Literally no one played well. Again, you pick off a pass, a couple good things do happen. They wake up in the second half of the first period. But like by and large, that was a terrible game by the Islanders. And that the game against Nashville was largely the same. That was an awful game until they woke up. And then they even had more opportunities than that to finish. And they kept, like you said, against Dallas and this, and they're giving up. It seems like it's a lack of focus. So I see you have some thoughts brewing here.
Yeah, I'll put it to you this way, and I'm not going to say who I spoke to just because, there's been questions raised about who I have spoken to from where I've spoken to them for the other team I do cover now. But I just spoke to earlier today an NHL GM about something very similar. And I'll attribute it to this. Said GM said to me, when you make a trade, right, for a player at the, say, quote unquote, trade deadline, he said it takes about 20 games for, that player to learn a new system. Flip it in reverse for the Islanders now, where they didn't trade for a player, but they traded a coach, right? Out goes Trotz, in comes Lambert. It takes about 20 games for you to really, get used to that system, sometimes even more, said this GM, right? And I said to him, is this like the consensus amongst like all GMs, like an unwritten rule? Like you all firmly believe, like if you acquire a player, it takes 20 to 25-ish, maybe even 30 games sometimes for your team or that player to get used to the system. He said, yeah, sometimes it takes a whole season. For instance, said GM, he was like, we acquired Bill Guerin and it took him, the 20 games left in the season and the playoffs to get used to the system. And then it was really not until he came back the following year with our team that, it started to really show like, okay, this is why we traded for this player. So in terms of the Islanders, it's like they, again, they traded Trotz for Lambert. There's a new system because let's face it, it's new. Like, Lamoriello said there's going to be a new voice and changes around here. And it was true that it's happened. Lambert's running a completely different kind of team. And this is the way I think of it, is the trade aspect. They traded systems and they're almost at, is it 19 games?
I think it's 20.
Is that,
I think it's even 20.
Okay, so they just hit the 20th game, right? Thanksgiving is this week, so we're hitting that time of the year where we're like, okay, teams either get really hot at the start of the year or really cold, sink or swim. And then we really start to figure out who the legitimate teams are. They start settling down and, play more consistently throughout the year. I think now that the 20 games has passed, we should start to see, or hopefully we start to see from the Islanders some more consistency in their system, because that's 20 games is the benchmark of when you're supposed to be comfortable and know the system like the back of your hand. Now, again, with the caveat that it was also mentioned that sometimes it takes a little bit more. There's going to be some growing pains here, I guess. But, the other thing too is I think
Well,
of
before you go too far, shouldn't it be getting better? Like, shouldn't we see the team getting more comfortable and less mistakes over time? I understand it's not like it's this after 20 games, like they're going to play a flawless game against Edmonton on Wednesday night. Like, I find that really hard to believe. Shouldn't it be getting better over time? I'm
well,
certainly not seeing that. I'm actually seeing it get worse, where you're seeing
well,
the same decisions, the bad decisions, continue to be made, and more of them. They're falling behind in half their games to start the games, and they're not starting well. Like, and Lambert was here. It's not like, yes, it's going to be different largely than Trotz. I think we're definitely seeing that, but it wasn't like a completely new voice. That was kind of one of the things that we thought would be really good about Lambert stepping in as a new coach and getting a little bit of a refresh. So, are you seeing them actually get better over time?
let's
Like,
let's
is this a
recognize
better
something
team
here.
now than it was 5 games ago?
Let's recognize something here. The Islanders are still 7th overall in the NHL, 3rd in the Metro. It's still a tough division. They're winning games. They're collecting points that they're supposed to. They're winning maybe games against tough opponents like they did the other night in Toronto, although albeit, and you were right to say this, it was pretty unwatchable. It wasn't a good game, yet they found a way to win. Sometimes the mark of a good team, in my opinion, Toronto got goalied. But the thing is, there's ebbs and flows, in my opinion, right? I don't think it's a straight line, like, oh, it's just going to continue to get better. I think it's going to go up and down a little bit. There's going to be sometimes some games where it's better, other games where you see the mistakes again. But, the thing for me, too, that I think about is in order for those things to continue to get better consistently, you need consistency in the lineup. And although it's the same bodies, the deck chairs are continuing to get shuffled. Like I mentioned to you earlier, certain players were switched around on the blue line, and Matthew Barzal still doesn't have consistent line mates, right? Because Wallstrom's up there some nights, and then he gets moved down. Parise is up there some nights, he gets moved down, and so they're still trying to figure out who is Matthew Barzal going to play with. And that's messing up who, Brock Nelson's going to play with, because when he's not playing with Anders Lee, who they have shown extreme chemistry with together, things change and the chemistry changes. So it's a couple of things there. And I think that, the Islanders are fortunate to be in the spot that they're in right now because, one, Noah Dobson continues to just play excellent hockey. And he's been very, he's been a big part of why they're continuing to bring in points. To Matthew Barzal as well. He's playing very good hockey. I understand it took him a really long time to score his first goal. He also then got his second, but he's playing so well right now. He could have scored 0 goals and had 82 assists, and I would have been happy with his year just because of how he's playing right now. And I know you and I spoke a little bit about Matthew Barzal last week about not being happy with how he's passing up opportunities to shoot. And you are right, but I did a little bit of digging on that, and his shot per game is actually up than it was in the previous season. So he's playing really well right now. And I think that
I'd love to see the quality on that. I think that's where, like, are you getting good shots? It doesn't mean just because it's up doesn't mean it couldn't be up more.
That's true.
He's definitely passing up on opportunities. I think most of all, what I'm disappointed in, and maybe this is where we can go in the conversation, is how he's definitely one of those players I'm disappointed in so far this season. About, like, he could be doing so much more. He could have been. He made a tip pass to Dobson last night. He had a wide open net. Shalgren was on the opposite post. The net was wide open. He was at the dot, and Barzal, not even for a second, thought about holding on to that puck. It was just he was just directing the puck up to Dobson at the point. That was just, and it's something, frankly, that we used to get on Josh Bailey about pretty often, where before he even got that puck, he knew where he wanted to put it as far as the pass, and even if things changed, the pass went there. And you're seeing that with Barzal now a little bit too.
I have a hard time pinning him as, like, one of the players I'm disappointed with, just because, again, I attribute it to, and it's annoying because we've spoken about this ad nauseum, but it's again just the revolving door of wingers is not helping, right? If he was able to, have a consistent line mate, look, it's not working out with Oliver Wahlstrom. He's up there. He gets moved off. Sometimes he scores and then he goes missing for a little while. They need to find somebody who Matthew Barzal can grow comfortable with, knowing, okay, X player is going to be at this spot at this time. I know I can pass him the puck there. And if not, if he's not there, which is rare, then I know I have to shoot, right? Right now, it's kind of like on every shift, he's kind of going out there and just kind of, all right, I guess we'll see what happens. Whereas, you look at guys like Sidney Crosby and Jake Gensel. When they get the puck in the offensive zone, Sidney Crosby knows where Jake Gensel is going to go, right? And all he has to do is take a peek. Jake Gensel's there, I'm passing him the puck. Jake Gensel's not there, I'm shooting the puck. He has options. Barzal doesn't have options.
I think he also overcomplicates things, which is why I'm saying I'm a little disappointed
because of the lack of chemistry.
I think that's definitely part of it. I think I love that we're going off script here. This is fantastic. I think the biggest thing, and this is for the team as a whole, which makes me believe it's some kind of system thing that but Barzal kind of does this anyway. The team really, really struggles to play north-south. And they're trying to make a lot of east-west passes, especially right at both blue lines, their blue line and the opposing blue line. And last night, just like Nylander alone had 5 takeaways, like picking off passes. If Barzal was just thinking about, all right, we got to get this puck to the net, whether it's a pass to somebody near the net or I'm shooting it, shooting for a rebound, like they're just not doing it. Like they are getting their opportunities. They are winning games, and I feel like maybe I am being a little too critical, but at the same time, again, I was so mad watching that Nashville game. That was horseshit. And that game last night, outside of like less than 10 minutes of 60 minutes of ice time, that was a terrible game. Like hardly anything redeeming about that game against Toronto. And I really struggled. Like I didn't turn the Nashville game off. Like normally I would have done that. Normally I just get frustrated, whatever the score was. I was like, all right, they're not coming back. And they used to not. It would be very easy. You didn't need to watch the rest of the game. You knew what was happening. Now they'll come back. And they definitely sniffed that. It was close. But it was still a bad game, like up until they woke up. And you can't do that. And a lot of it is just simply bad passes from everybody. I think Barzal included in that. There's no one that's absolved from this. I really don't. The lineup's not changing that much. It's really just Beauvillier, Bailey, Wahlstrom, Parise. Those are the players. So by now, because that was what it was last year too, by now you'd expect something. I agree that Wahlstrom and Barzal are not working. Barzal thinks the game differently than Wahlstrom does, and it's just not working. The two of them don't have chemistry. I don't think that's how they need to play with each other longer. I think it's just they're not compatible. Problem is, as you said, Nelson is compatible with Lee, and so is Barzal. And that's the difficult part. And then we spoke last week about trades and different things. And I think my issue with that is I cannot have those conversations at this point. After last summer, I'm like not over it. B, like I just don't understand where the assets are coming from. Like completely different issue. But when they're playing well, I think the third thing, C, is like when they're playing well, we're like, oh, this is great. They're so deep. They're great. Look at all these players. They all have 5 to 8, 9 goals. Wow, look how deep this offense is. But when they're playing like shit, then we're like, oh, they need to make a trade. So I was like, I think my main thing was like just premature. That was kind of like that
It's-
was just my closing
So
on that.
I think you have good points there though, right? Because you're right. We do say often like, "Oh, look how good they are playing because they're so deep. Look at all these, look at the 10 players they have with 5 or more goals at this point. That's really good." But then you watch these games against, Toronto, where although they won, they were largely outsped by pace of foot. And I don't mean, the whole system because the Islanders are playing a faster game. However, their foot speed per player is not as fast as, say, Toronto is. And Matthew Barzal is the only player who you could say is, able to do that, right?
But
They
he
need another
doesn't do
star.
it enough. Yeah, I mean,
But
yes,
that's the thing,
need
right? So we're able to say, oh, when they're playing really good, look at all these players who are contributing, and then when they're playing really bad, we can't turn around and say, oh, look at these 1 or 2 guys, and not even one, right? Because Matthew Barzal is not going to be able to do it alone. But we can't even say, look at these 2 superstars that we have that carried the team despite the loss, but made it interesting, right? I love Brock Nelson. I think he's an excellent player. I think he's just not, he's if we're putting players in tiers of franchise, elite, top 6, I think he's like one of the best top 6 centers. He's not elite. I think his
Oh no.
shot is elite, but I don't think he's an elite player, right? And after Barzal, Nelson's your next best forward. So you don't have any elite company with Matthew Barzal that you can say like, there were so many opportunities for, Barzal, an ex-player, that they at least made it interesting, right? It's just not like that. When the team collectively or when the middle 6 crew collectively goes down together, it looks really bad, right? Because that's what the Islanders are. They're a middle 6 crew, a crew of middle sixers.
Oh yeah, we joke forever. They're a team
Yeah,
of second lines, And I
right.
think with Barzal, my biggest thing, and like I was saying before, if he would just go north south, I'm not saying he needs to go 1-on-3 every single time, but if he went north south instead of curling every single time, it's very predictable. You can just tell what he's gonna do and where the puck's gonna go. Very rarely is it a safe play. I understand that he's, at a certain level, you want to make the best play that you can, and he's certainly capable of doing that sometimes. But I think their recognition of when it's not possible, and just go north south, beat the guy, don't
But again,
curl.
it's
There was a time a couple rushes last night. I'm like, you could beat him, just go, just put your
it's
head
very
down
hard though
and
because
skate.
there's been so many instances which he'll play that north-south game and end up in the offensive zone by himself. He'll get behind the net, try to set up, and he'll turn around and be like, where's my lines? Where's my teammates? Where's my wingers? I have no one to pass the puck to. Turnover. And that's
Yeah,
why
I
the
mean, all
Islanders
right, I
struggle
can.
to play north-south. They have to, or they try to, they try to at least engage the north-south mentality. They get to the red line, bringing the puck out of the defensive zone, and they, again, Barzal realizes like, who's with me? No one. I'm faster than everybody. I don't have the foot speed around me to play this north-south game. I need to go east-west to at least bob and weave and buy time, so I have people around me to feed the puck to pass the puck off to, and set up in the zone if I can. So I think that's, again, I get that the Islanders, and look, we're sitting here, we're talking about the bad things about the Islanders. Meanwhile, they're 7th overall in the NHL right now. Ultimately, though,
They
I
don't
do
look good
think
doing it though.
they
That's the
don't look good
problem.
doing
Like
it. You're right, and I think that the problem is that they're playing a faster system, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a faster team per player and their foot speed.
So you keep saying faster system, and I'm really trying to think about it. I think, yeah, I mean they've tried to up the tempo a bit. They really, it's funny. It's like it's either a turnover or a goal or a really good opportunity, right? Like there's not a good It's not just, oh, it was a good rush and like their D broke it up or something like that. It's like it either goes in the other net or it goes in their net, or it's a good opportunity against. Like there's really no middle ground. I think that's what's really scary to me is like they need to clamp it down, and maybe, as by the end of the calendar year, right after Thanksgiving or whatever, and they certainly have enough. They have 3 games in 4 nights, which won't make it easier to figure that out, and the schedule is certainly not going to lessen over time. They need to clamp it down a little bit. I think even if they made the playoffs playing like this, which at this point, luckily Pittsburgh and Washington are either hurt or not playing well, so they're a little bit lower in the standings and giving the Islanders a little bit of a chance. So even more reason to not only win the games against those 2 teams, but get as many points as possible. Start losing in OT at the very least. Get those loser points. They're 12-8, which is great, but that big goose egg at the end is rough. And if it was 12-6-2, that makes it a little bit interesting there. Maybe they're pushing Carolina a little bit for number 2 overall, and it just every point counts when you get later in the season. But they need to tighten up. This doesn't look like they're a playoff team. I'm worried about that part of it. Like, does Lambert have what it takes to tighten the team up when it counts? It'd be a mess, be a disaster, all that kind of stuff.
You know what's so interesting too, and like the Islanders blue line appears set at the moment, right? Pelech, Pulock, Romanov, Dobson, and Aho has claimed that 6th spot, and he looks good doing it. I can't lie.
He's looked much better lately too.
Much better.
He's against Toronto. He was moving his feet and
that's
hard to
argue
thing. Against it.
He's one of the only. I shouldn't say the only, but he's one of the few guys on the roster right now who have that foot speed that I keep mentioning. Right. The weird thing to me is I consistently listen to. Of course, I'm going to bring him up again. Here I go. Jeff Marek and Elliot Friedman all the time. And more, I keep hearing about the Islanders still being in that Jacob Chikrin conversation. And it's just like, maybe I get I understand wanting to upgrade, but you're just really not, you're really missing the mark there if that's what you think that this team needs. I'm not one to question what Lou Lamoriello is doing, and look, that could just be tongue-in-cheek and just what I'm hearing, and that could have been, hey, what's up with Jacob Chikrin? Oh, it costs that much. Click. That's what it could have been. But if that's the mentality, like upgrade the blue line, we're missing the mark here. Like Matthew Barzal needs line mates.
Yeah, and we keep talking about that. That's really been since Tavares, and like I said, I don't really have the energy for that. I'm trying to pick apart what is the team lacking. Are players like Beauvillier, who are a ghost in between goals. I agree with you that I don't even know where a player like Chikrin fits into the lineup. I'll ask you a question though. How many games has Jacob Chikrin played this year?
0.
1. He just played, I believe, a couple nights ago. That was his first game.
Oh, did he play his first game the other night?
We're not even going to know what he is until February.
Right.
So, that's a bad bet at this point. And he has years left. You do not want to be like Vancouver, stuck with an OEL. And I'm not suggesting Chikrin is going to fall off the map like Oliver Ekman-Larsson did. And have this huge bloated contract he's never going to live up to. But that's not a good bet right now. Don't do that. If you bet on somebody short term, like Romanov, Dobson's going to live up to that, and he's going to get paid afterwards. Aho stepped up. You do have someone like Salo. Don't mess with that. If you're going to upgrade, make it a serious upgrade. I don't know what that even looks like. But I agree. If right, I think, and I would do it on forward, but I don't see it happening. Frankly, I think I'm in the mode where I'm not reading any rumor, anything. I don't care who writes it, from Friedman to I don't even care. It really super doesn't matter until it happens. If this summer's proved anything, is that no one knows anything, and it is not worth diving into. We can talk about who we want. I think that's fine to do. I think we can definitely bullshit about that. It's not worth mentioning who said what and what articles are saying these Islanders are into because they don't know. And there's some players that we could talk about as far as like who would be a good fit. I wonder about Bo Horvat just because is he a center? Am I remember is
He is a center, and I say that with the caveat that you put together Lee Nelson Barzell. Just my opinion.
oh yeah I think that you're leaving Horvat out to dry a little bit there because there's really no one to surround him with. It definitely automatically makes your roster deeper. So I wonder ultimately what that how that would shake out and what that lineup would look like. I think that's a good inclination to like put those three players together. Um, I honestly don't know who else. You got to think like does is this you go after as Horvat is a UFA. So like are you going in just all in and like Ryan Smithing this like really hoping he comes back like but it doesn't matter and we're going for it or
It'd
are
have
you
to be a
only going to
sign and
trade
trade.
for somebody that has a sign and trade or at least there's an agreement a handshake deal to sign something afterwards like Palmieri and Peugeot. I don't know what that looks like. And again, that's like a lot of details where I'm like trying to concentrate on this season. Um, in a couple of years, the cap will go up, and the Islanders have a lot of UFAs of their own to take care of, and other contracts they need to take care of this next off season. Figure out they will need another goalie if it's not Varlamov, who my fingers are crossed that he takes a pay cut and just returns. And doesn't make 5 million and kind of just comes back at 2.5. That would be fantastic and kind of keep it at $8 to $10 million between the two goalies. Just give Sorokin a bit of a raise. Um, but yeah, I don't really know who would kind of help. I think we've always struggled with the question that we always come back to and have never found the right answer. I don't think, or at least not had like consistent consensus on what that is between the two of us and Islander country, whatever. Is who is the right player to play with Barzell? Like I wonder because we haven't seen it before, right? We don't know unless you go back to junior and just see like who he really clicked with, and then try to find either that player or if they're still around in the NHL or are comparable. I don't know what that looks like. We said the same thing about Tavares, frankly. Who, what does that look like? What's the ideal player? Maybe less so of a question considering Trott's no longer in the picture, and there wasn't this like defensive liability kind of part that needed to play as much of a role. But now that it's a little bit more free flowing, I wonder what that looks like. I wonder
Or you could just
what
agree
kind
with
of
me and say
player.
it's Brock Nelson.
Well, all right, so it is Brock Nelson. That's my question. Is like you're still rearranging a little bit. Like, all right, so you're adding somebody, but then you still have like Bailey, Bavillier, Wallstrom to kind of like
I just think
you're
that
still filtering players in and out.
Brock Nelson is such a different kind of scorer than Oliver Wallstrom is that uh it works for Barzell. Like Brock
Yeah.
Nelson is reliable in all three zones. He knows he's positionally sound. He knows where to be in the offensive zone to be open, receive a pass, and find the back of the net. Like Wallstrom's still working through those kinks, and he may or may not ever get there. We don't really know yet, but Brock Nelson he's on 40 goal pace again.
I'm not asking necessarily. I agree with you about Nelson. I think what I'm asking is, so you bring somebody in like a Bo Horvat, then what does that line look like? I'm not trying to just present a different problem and something to complain about. It just then who are you surrounding that newer player with? Is it a center that you bring in, or can you get the same thing as a Brock Nelson type player to bring in? Because like you said, it doesn't. Maybe he doesn't need somebody that's elite. Maybe you need somebody that's like a Brock Nelson. Now it's easier if it is, but then you're presented with a different problem on your second line. At least Lee and Nelson work. How do you make Barzell's line better without taking away from the rest of the lineup? I think would be the better question,
I
or at
mean,
least a more direct question.
Yeah, I mean, you already have 2/3 of that, tandem together one way or another, whether it's Lee with Barzell or Lee with Nelson. So let's just say you slide Nelson up, now you're sliding Wallstrom down. And you have the second line would be, for argument's sake, it's Bailey, Horvat, Beauvillier. You don't love it, you
I
don't
think
hate
that's
it.
that. Well, I don't like it because
You have
you're looking at two
Parise,
streaky
Peugeot
players.
yeah, but I mean you're looking at two streaky players right now. That's who it was as of yesterday. So it's like that now. Horvat coming in just gives you one super strong line, whereas you right now have 4 lines that are good. Then you have, if Horvat comes in, 1 super strong line and 3 good lines.
Maybe it would definitely take some moving around. I hope that it's done early enough. I think this is the thing that you'd hope would motivate Lamoriello, a little bit off of if you have time, use it. There definitely isn't a lot of time, and if it takes a
No.
player, as you said earlier, 20 games or so to get used to a system, you'd hope in January that clock starts ticking immediately. Like that move would have to happen by early February for it
Right.
to really take an effect.
Look, Garth Snow had the right idea trading for Thomas Vanek in December. It was the right idea. Because again, that earlier conversation we had, it takes 20 something games to get used to things, and once you're past that hump, you can play the rest of the year, and you should be acclimated. I think that was the right idea. It was poorly executed, but it was the right idea. I think that's when, if you're going to do something like, let's say for instance, the Islanders are still status quo as they are right now, by December 15th, make an improvement. Solidify your spot in that area over the next in that area of the standings over the next what is it, December, January, February, March, 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, they can't do this for sure. Like
No.
this can't be how they go through the rest of the season. And I think what's really interesting is, and this is why I say, like, by January you got to do something, like whether that's a depth move or like whatever you're gonna do it earlier than he normally would. Like you don't have as much time as you think. I also think like some of it's between the ears. Like it's not the yips, but like it's just bad decision making. That's why I'm like, I
Yeah.
wanted to that's why most of this episode was just concentrating on like it's bad passes, it's overhandling the puck at times. It's a
Yeah.
lot of different things that I'm like, that's very solvable on a coaching level and like a individual player level. This isn't about like
Yeah.
necessarily where players are going to be. A lot of these guys have played together for so long. Who cares what line they're on? Everyone's played with everybody at this point over the last, granted, people were out last season, so at least maybe between 60 and 80 games, maybe 50 and 80 games. Parise is probably the only one that's played with literally everybody, considering he's been in the lineup. He was in the lineup the entire last season. I think the lone Islander to do so.
He's the Islanders Iron Man for the past 2 seasons.
Yeah, which is incredible. And kind of speaking of which, and we can, we'll wind down the show shortly, but I did want to make sure to make mention of Josh Bailey's healthy scratches, and
Yeah.
how with or without him in the lineup, it didn't really seem to make all that much of a difference. The Islanders did, win some games, but you're playing a team like Ottawa or whatever. Ross Johnson didn't look terrible outside of just like stupid bonehead penalties and stuff like that, where it just seems like he's looking for stuff, and I'm like, you're there as like a reactionary player. Do not start the fight. Don't just be a nuisance like against Ottawa. Like that's just not it. Like they got to go win a hockey game. But I want to concentrate on Josh Bailey. What did you think of the scratches? Was something really weird like right after his 1,000th game? Say we will if they got it in under his belt, and then they said, okay, you got to step up, and then he didn't. They put him in the press box. How do you think he looked like? How do you think he looked afterwards?
More of the same. And, I know he scored that game tying goal the other night. And I think you need to or you need to continue tweeting about players who need to play better. And then they ultimately do 5 seconds later. But, it was more of the same. It was good to see him take the shot and get that game tying goal, but it's something he needs to do more often. And he needs to play with more aggressiveness. Like, there's just so many lackadaisical moments from him where, look, I get it. Like, this is, fans have been screaming about this for such a long time, but now he's starting to become a liability to the point where he's getting scratched out of the lineup, right? You need to see a more aggressive Josh Bailey. Like, he doesn't throw hits. He doesn't, fight hard on the boards, win puck battles, board battles, like none of that. And, if you're not going to contribute that in the role that he's in right now, which is in flux right now, he's on the second line, but he was a third liner, just a couple weeks ago, or just even a couple of games ago. Like, you need to be able to bring those intangibles. And it struck me as odd when, Lane Lambert spoke to his being of a healthy scratch. And he said, like, he's an important part of this team. Like, moving forward, we need him, no doubt. And, he continued to be scratched afterwards and still showed no motivation and, just played really lax. Like, if your style of game is to, be a playmaker and you don't throw a ton of hits and everything, like, I get that. But if you're not contributing that either and you're still showing nothing, the word that I think of as the oomph, if you're not showing any of the oomph, then, I don't know, are you just collecting a paycheck at this point? Like, super controversial player, like, so polarizing. Like, he either does something really great or something really awful, and there's like no middle ground.
Yeah, he definitely, there's no sandpaper to his game, and I think that's fine. But I think that, you said lackadaisical, and I think that's the problem for me is there's not it doesn't look like he's trying very hard, and a lot of players can look like that and actually be really successful. I've heard other podcasts talk about different players, and like, players think that like, I don't know, I guess maybe it was said about Alex Semin back in the day, or a bunch of other players that were like really successful. And not to say that Bailey hasn't been. I think he's proven that he can be, or used to be at least, capable of being an important part of the team. But you just see very like passive play. I think that's what I would call it. He's not hard on the puck. He's not hard on his stick. He's not hard on other team sticks. I'm not asking him to throw hits. They have plenty of guys that can do that. But yeah, he's not winning puck battles. He's not getting in the hard areas. Like, the older you get, the less you're going to be the creative player. Like, I understand you don't, still human beings. I don't want him to just get beat up, but like, you got to go to those areas. You got to get
right. I'm not asking
him. You got to like do something.
I'm not asking him to break Cal Clutterbuck's all-time hits record. I'm asking him to, in his own end, take the puck off the opponent's stick, push it up ice. You did your job.
Look
Thank
engaged.
You. Right.
He doesn't even look that engaged in the play. I think that's part of it. Like, the fact that he even just was in that position to score that goal the other night was surprising. Right? Like,
the batteries in his controller died.
Yeah, well, maybe Shalgren's certainly
and
too.
The puck found his stick. Yeah. I wanted to talk about the Beauvillier goal. Were you going to go there?
We can. I definitely. I want to talk about the upcoming games to end the show, so this could be one of the last points for sure.
Okay. That goal, I don't understand where that player is majority of the time, because should Shalgren maybe have given up that goal? Maybe it's a goal he wants back. However, look at the play, right? Look at the confidence in Beauvillier's skating in that overtime, right? He knows exactly where Brock Nelson's going to leave that puck. He picks it up and doesn't even think about it. Picks up the puck and shoots it seconds later. Picks a corner. Excellent shot. Should Shalgren have saved it? Maybe. Still an excellent shot, no less. Too. It was a very nice shot. Where is that player the majority of the time? If Beauvillier can do that, like, I don't understand. It's between the ears, right? But that's what you are holding on to in Anthony Beauvillier if you're holding on to, because he's shown that he can do that. And again, of course, it's overtime. That's where that's his bread and butter. He does it, in the big moment. Traditionally, not so much recently, but that's the player that everybody in that locker room, I think, knows that Anthony Beauvillier can be. I was really impressed by that play from him, reading Nelson, knowing where that puck was going to be, picking it up and not hesitating to shoot and putting a really pretty shot on net and ultimately getting rewarded. But I just wonder, why is that so hard for him to find at least every other night, or at least twice a week?
Yeah, you'd certainly more often than not, right? Like I think switching that up where it's like, all right, you're gonna have bad nights, but that's where the rest of the lineup comes in. He just needs to participate that way all the
Yeah.
time. That was a great shot. He's a lefty. He's going down the left wing. So we went
He
cross.
picks the right corner.
Yeah, it picks the right corner. That's a hard shot to pick the opposite corner, especially with a defender in front of you. I don't think Giordano played it very well, and may have screened Shalgren a little bit.
No, but when
And
he
Shalgren,
plays at
I
that
think,
speed, when Beauvillier is playing at
yes,
that speed and he's skating that fast, he's going to make the defenders, make mistakes.
yeah, no, I think that's 100% it. I think that if that's kind of what I mean is like they're playing so east west that this new pace and speed that the team is trying to play with, they actually aren't doing it as much as they think they are, because so much of the speed is where the other team can contain it.
Right.
So like it almost doesn't matter when they're going straight up and down. Look at how the Toronto's offense just blew by the Islanders all last night. They're just playing north-south. They really didn't do
Yeah.
anything special. The Islanders are capable of that. They have enough players that can skate throughout the lineup. They honestly just aren't choosing those paths. They're being way too deliberate. Where they were deliberate in the past on where they would shoot and like overpass, but be in the zone and have possession. Now they just like have possession and lose the puck on bad passes because they're not going towards the net. They're never choosing the moment to shoot. And every once in a while they're having a game with a bunch of shots, but it's like the way that they're being deliberate is a little bit different, and it's hard to watch, especially because it's just mistake after mistake after mistake, and every single game it just seems to be the same stuff over and over. And go back and watch Tavares' goal the other night. Brendan Burke said this on the broadcast, on Monday night against Toronto, that Pelech was furious on that penalty kill afterwards because Pulak was just out to lunch. He was trying to be aggressive way too high, and Pelech had no shot in front. Clutterbuck had his man kind of on the opposite post, and Martin just was able to feed a wide open Tavares. Pulak didn't slide back down to in that coverage down in front. And Clutterbuck wasn't going to be able to cover two guys, and didn't see Tavares or didn't something Tavares. Maybe Pelech should have been covering Tavares because Marner can't necessarily score from behind the net. And Sorokin could have just taken him and a little sweep check or something like that, a little poke check. But that's the kind of stuff that just like, that's what's really aggravating. And then those mistakes in the defensive zone are translating in the offensive zone. They're just not connecting. Like, again, I don't know if it's a chemistry thing. I don't know if it's what plays they've drawn up are just not working. I have no idea, but it's increasingly frustrating. What are your expectations? So they play the Oilers, Blue Jackets, and then I believe a home and home against Philly.
Yeah. So
what are your expectations for these next 4 games?
So they definitely need to respond against Nashville when they get there, but we'll talk about that then. Look, the Oilers are going to be angry, losing back to it's not back to back, but two to the Devils in the recent history. A frustrating game against the Devils the other night too, where they played pretty well, just couldn't solve Vitek Vanacek. So Rob Draisaitl a couple times, Rod McDavid a couple times. So they're going to be angry. They're going to want to rebound. They play some of the fastest hockey in the NHL that I've seen live right now, and largely due to the fact that they have a McDavid and a Draisaitl. So you just want to see them play a meaningful game against Edmonton, right? If you're going to claim to be, that last year was an anomaly, and the previous two seasons Islanders was more of what they are, then you need to play a meaningful game against Edmonton. At least hang in there. If you don't get the win, that's okay, but play meaningful hockey, a la what you love to say. And then going into Columbus. And then playing Philly in that home and home, look, you got to get 2 points from Columbus. They don't have Zach Werenski. They don't have Patrick Laine. Like, they're missing a ton of players. They're icing, a ton of rookies and sophomores who are still learning the NHL game. Like, you got to take 2 points from them. And I know that they're probably going to play a fast pace because they're a young team, but they're an inexperienced team as well. You got to collect those 2 points. And then, Philly is, if I'm not mistaken, they're no longer playing like they were at the beginning of the season, right? I think that's over for them. Yeah, they're 2-6-2 in their last 10. Like, they're not playing. They're minus 14 in goal differential. John Tortorella teams are going to play you hard, but it doesn't matter. Like, they need to collect those points as well. Like, this stretch of games minus Edmonton is the expected wins stretch, right? The Columbus, you need 2 points. Philly, you can claim you should get 4 points there. Like, if you're claiming to be the superior team, and then you're going to go into Nashville on Friday, who they're a good team. Like, again, play a meaningful game against Nashville, and we'll be okay. And then the following Sunday, they play Chicago, another 2 points that they should collect. So, not the hardest schedule, but there are some teams embedded in between, moving forward for the next little while that, as long as they show that they're playing well and they take those points from those who they're supposed to take points from, you can start to feel a little bit more confident about this team. And again, I say that with the caveat that, look, they're still in 7th place overall in the NHL, 3rd in the Metro. It's a very close, 2nd and 3rd place right there. Devils are running away with it, but take the points that you're supposed to, so that you can, if you drop some later in the year against, maybe a tougher week where you're playing a couple teams in a row who are playoff juggernauts or Stanley Cup contenders, you have that cushion. So this is a stretch of games they need to win.
I'd be comfortable with 3 or 4. And maybe lose a game, go 3-0-1, lose a game in overtime. Just keep collecting points. Yeah, maybe to Edmonton. I mean, at least that's a good excuse. Playing against somebody like McDavid, you're able to kind of get away with it a little bit. But I think just like the way that the standings are shaking out and where the Islanders can kind of just keep pace. Like, if maybe they switch, like Pittsburgh kind of come back. They're 9-7-3. They have 21 points. Down, that's at 24. Like, again, those games against Pittsburgh and eventually Washington, if they get their stuff together, though, injuries have kind of hampered them a little bit. So primarily the games against Pittsburgh are going to be huge, right? Definitely collect the points when you can against teams you should be beating. But like, I'm circling those Pittsburgh games on the calendar. I think those are going to be they're always hard games. The Islanders kind of like either they can sweep them in the playoffs or maybe they really struggle against them at other times. So like they need to kind of figure that out. But once they start going, that's going to be really tough. Pittsburgh's 5-3-2. They've won 3 in a row. In their over their last 10. They need to create some separation there. They need to make teams look up to them in the standings. They need to play like that. They need to play like they're the better team, and just be consistent from right from puck drop.
That's the thing. Like, you get into December, right? The first game in December, you're playing the Predators. right? Then you have, more often than not, you have teams who are looking to either be playoff contenders or get back into the playoff picture. You have Nashville, St. Louis, New Jersey, Carolina, Boston, Vegas, Colorado, with the Rangers, Florida, Pittsburgh, and that's the majority of December, right? The only playoff teams you're not playing in December right now are Columbus, Arizona, and Chicago. It's a tough month. So if you want to go into that month with momentum and confidence, you need to beat Columbus at the end of November. You need to beat Philadelphia. You need to play a meaningful game against Edmonton and at least show that you can hang in order to have a successful December, because that could be a tough month for the Islanders that sets them apart from the rest, and not in the good way.
Exactly. I think you don't want to be in the uncomfortable middle there. You definitely want to be a little bit above. And who knew we'd be having the conversation? I think especially when they started 2-4-0, and even before that, when we really didn't know what this team was, and who they were going to be, frankly, under Lambert. It's crazy to think like, yep, you got to maintain your position at the top of the division. I don't think a team like the Devils can hang forever. They're going to come back down to earth, but they're doing themselves a lot of favors. And we're not going to talk about the Devils, but other than that, but much to your chagrin, I suppose. But when they do come back down to earth, they've given themselves so much cushion, and that's what the Islanders need to kind of look to and say, we need to build as much cushion early as possible, so that when things do get a little shaky, and maybe that's now, right? They won those 5 games in a row, and maybe now they're hitting some turbulence, and they can kind of pull it back together, and then finish out the calendar year, in good shape. But yeah, they definitely need to. I think this is an important stretch. Just focus. Slow. I know you want to pick up the pace and like control tempo, but settle down. Slow the game down a little bit. Play your game. Do your thing. Actually control the tempo. And that doesn't mean push it at every moment, right? They're still trying to figure out when to do that. When the puck, Aho had great quotes either last week or the week before. I may have mentioned them here. I know I wrote about them. And how it takes a long time to kind of figure that out. And he's just getting there. And I think the rest of the team is still trying to figure that out too. That's not really an excuse. That's mostly just what's happening, but that doesn't absolve them from needing to fix it. Right. You could just kind of, whether it's an excuse or not, you could say it, but you still need to fix it. And, there's no blame and no one's whatever. Okay, that's really great. I almost don't care what happened the first 20 games. Now what? This is going to be more of a what have you done for me lately kind of thing. And we'll go from a game to game thing. I'm not worried about the last 20 games. Fine. You put yourself in a position to be top 3 in the division. Now go prove it. You kind of got by in the skin of your teeth here. Now go out and really prove it to yourself and everybody else that it's the real deal and not just Pittsburgh fell off and Washington fell off. The Rangers aren't as hot, although they're only 2 points behind them at the moment. They also hold the season series advantage even if they lose the next one. But if the Rangers have more points, it doesn't matter. So they need to be tied, or the Islanders need to be ahead for that to work.
Right.
Yeah. So it's they definitely. I agree with everything you said about the upcoming schedule. Definitely a moment to where they can kind of create some good separation there.
Yeah.
You all set? We're good.
I'm all set.
Happy Thanksgiving. Happy early
Thanksgiving. You too. To all of our American listeners. I don't think we actually said Happy Thanksgiving to our Canadian listeners, did we?
I think we mentioned it,
time.
so I feel bad.
Well, if we didn't,
enjoy midday football, Canada, if you watch that, I guess. The World Cup's going on. We have basketball. We have hockey. Just sports up the wazoo. There's college basketball. There's a little bit of everything. You definitely
go
have,
sports.
Go sports ball. It's just everything together. All right. Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Nasman Hockey. I do not know what's going to happen when Twitter goes away. If Twitter goes away, when Twitter goes away,
It's not.
I don't know the right way to say that.
The
Maybe.
dead conversation is now dead.
Well, that's good. Well, we'll be there as long as we're there. We'll likely just switch to Instagram, which is a lot less newsy. Facebook too, just because it's not like chronological.
Yeah.
Mastodon is really messy. There's something else called Hive Social, I think, that looks a lot like Twitter. I was thinking about that too. I'm not really sure. Maybe we just need to do more YouTube stuff and just kind of deal with it.
Maybe
we need to really jump on Discord, whether that's our own or a different one, just to keep up with it.
Or maybe nothing will happen to Twitter and everything will be status quo.
Let's do that. Let's do that one. You can find James' work at the Fourth Period. You can find mine at the Hockey Writers. Make sure you subscribe to Isles Fix for your daily curated Islanders newsletters. James, take us home.
Until next time, everybody. Let's go Islanders.